people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Okay, we'll start with this. American amateur stand-up Virginia Futch posted this to her social media, and it reads, making my pro debut April 9th on the top-ranked card in Costa Mesa, California at the Hangar venue. Been ready for this moment for a long time. Tickets go on sale tomorrow. Tomorrow being some days ago. Better still, Virginia Futch, good friends with Michaela Mayer, unified super featherweight champion Michaela Mayer. She's going to be making her debut on the undercard of Michaela Mayer's upcoming title defense this weekend.
Sport the professional record. No wins, no losses, no draws, and no knockouts.
Why? What do you mean, why? Because she hasn't debuted as a professional yet. She's going to debut as a professional this Saturday.
As an amateur, Virginia campaigned in the flyweight division.
She's a southpaw.
She's 34 years old, so I imagine they're going to move her fast.
Assuming she is to debut in the flyweight division and campaign there henceforth beyond this Saturday's professional debut in the flyweight division.
Wait a minute, flyweight? That's where Marlena Esparza and Oko Fujioka campaigned.
That's right. Set to go down this weekend is the unification match between those two champions, with the Ring Magazine title on the line in that fight to crown not just a Ring Magazine champion in this division, but a lineal one as well. Assuming Virginia Futch is going to debut at flyweight and campaign there henceforth, the winner of that fight will be a person of interest at some point for Virginia Futch.
Otherwise known as Jenny.
Jenny Futch.
Hey, what's Jenny short for?
Virginia, what do you think it's short for?
You don't crack wise with me.
The weakest link between the champions, the belt holders, the titleists at 112 pounds would have to be Argentina's own Tamara DeMarco, newly crowned WBO flyweight champion Tamara DeMarco, who very recently dished out Ana E. Lopez her first professional loss and took her WBO title. I'm expecting to hear news of a rematch between them. I'm expecting them to run it back. There is also unbeaten, long-reigning champion, also of Argentina, Leonela Paola Judica. I expect that given Virginia Futch's age and her amateur background, they're going to move her through the ranks fast, and she's going to challenge one of these title holders.
That's what I think the plan is.
But I think Virginia is adept to the task, rubbing elbows with the likes of Michaela Mayer, Raquel Miller, Franchon Cruz, Claricia Shields, Marlena Esparza,
Tiaria Brown.
I think Virginia's got what it takes, and I look forward to seeing what she can do.
Does this pro debut herald the top-ranked partnership?
Well, that has yet to be determined. We then come to the main event of that same card. Michaela Mayer will defend her two alphabet titles against former champion Jennifer a veteran, a former champion, and what still is a serviceable fighter, moving down from 135 pounds down to 130 pounds from lightweight to super featherweight. She's coming right off that loss to Katie Taylor last year. I do think that 130 pounds is a more optimal weight for Jennifer Hahn, who really wasn't a big puncher at featherweight, where she reigned as that division's IBF champion. I think that given her age, 38 years old, this is a better weight for her. I think it proved too difficult to continue to make featherweight, and that's why she moved up in the first place, though perhaps she climbed too high going up to lightweight. I reiterate, she wasn't a big puncher at featherweight. She wasn't going to be a bigger puncher at lightweight.
Yeah, this is a better weight for her, I think.
So I don't like her chances against Michaela Mayer. I don't. Michaela Mayer is sharp.
She just took on one of the biggest and most aggressive punchers in the sport.
Maiva Hamadouche, and not only did Michaela hold her own, bang in the booth with the brawler, she won the fight. Took Maiva Hamadouche's blue belt. Not just that, she took on Erica Farias last year. Now,
that victory's aging well.
I'd say so, since Erica Farias just handed Sandy Ryan, then unbeaten Sandy Ryan, up there at 140 pounds. She just handed Sandy Ryan her first professional loss, but she didn't have that kind of luck with Michaela.
Oh, not last year. Michaela had 2 fights last year.
This will be her first fight of this year, a keep busy fight, a title defense of her 2 alphabet titles against the former champion in Jennifer Hahn. I can't criticize Michaela for keeping busy with the likes of a Jennifer Hahn because she doesn't have much of a choice until...
I'd much rather see her fighting a Delphine Persoon.
Though, When you consider who Michaela's already fought, that's asking a lot. From Erica Farias to Maiva Hamadouche to Delphine Persoon, I mean, come on.
Like I said, I'd love to see that fight, but it's asking a lot.
Jennifer Hahn is a good, serviceable fighter, cerebral, well-rounded, balanced approach of offense and defense, so I don't like her chances against the very statuesque Michaela Mayer, who can box and punch from the outside.
Bang and brawl on the inside. She's well-rounded.
Time when there's a dividing line and fight fans are taking sides. Either they're with Baumgartner or they're with Mayer. You have to admit that Michaela is a quality operator. I look at this fight, and it really is just the question of how does Michaela want to win? Does she want a more educated and cerebral approach? Is that how she's going to go about securing the W? Or is she going to take it to Jennifer Hahn the way she just took it to Maiva Hamadouche? Make it an action fight? That's the question. Conservatively, I'm going with Michaela Mayer on points, so I don't rule out a stoppage.
No fight fans, they love knockouts.
Although Jennifer Hahn, she's never been stopped. She hasn't. There's a first time for everything. Jennifer is coming off a loss, and she is coming down in weight. She's getting up there in age. Maybe Michaela Mayer might be the first one to stop Jennifer Hahn. We'll see this weekend. In men's super lightweight news, we know that Sandor Martin very recently was in action in Barcelona against Jose Felix, and he secured the W in stylish fashion. He did that, but post-fight, he called out Jose Zepada, he called out Jose Ramirez, he called out Teofimo Lopez. He's calling out the big names, wants the big guns at 140 pounds, and I don't doubt Sandor's willingness to take on these fighters, and I don't doubt their willingness to take him on, as Jose Zepada caught wind of the call-out, reacted to it, and he's all for it. He wants to fight Sandor Martin. That's an excellent fight. I think the 140-pound division is one of the more underrated divisions in the sport of boxing. Oftentimes, the conversation is dominated by the lightweights and the welterweights,
the heavyweights, and whatever Canelo Alvarez is doing.
Oftentimes, the conversation in the sport of boxing is dominated by the same pool of guys, the same pool of hot topics, as it were, whereas 140 pounds, a lot of those guys ain't got the profile of a Gennady Golovkin, of a Canelo Alvarez, of a Tyson Fury, or an Anthony Joshua, but it's a very, very exciting division, especially when you mix and match the names. I very much like the idea of a Sandor Martin versus Jose Zepada fight, or a Sandor Martin versus Jose Ramirez, Teofimo Lopez. I like every single one of those fights. Every single one of those fights is intriguing, but alas, politics.
Oh, what, you thought politics weren't going to be involved? This is boxing, sweetheart.
It's only a matter of time before the politics of boxing creep their way into the conversation. Sandor Martin is as good as a Matchroom and DAZN fighter. That's where his last two fights took place. He headlined his last show in his native Spain, in Barcelona, and he's very close to fighting for the WBA title. It appears that Sandor Martin, in spite of targeting those guys, he's not en route to fight those guys. What he is en route to do is fight for the WBA title as soon as it becomes available. In the WBA's last set of ranked standings, Sandor Martin ranked in at number 4. When those ranks are updated, it's conceivable he will have gained ground and find himself in a position to fight for the full-fledged WBA title as soon as Josh Taylor vacates it.
Whereas Jose Zapata's en route to fight for the green belt. He's en route to fight for the WBC.
Jose Ramirez is right there with him, though he does seem to be taking a special interest in the brown belt, the WBO title. He wants to secure a cushy rank with them. At the same time, Teofimo Lopez, who Sandor Martin also mentioned, he's en route to fight for the WBO title. He's already secured a cushy number 2 spot with the WBO, having not even fought as a super lightweight. Essentially what I'm getting at is the guy Sandor Martin called out. I don't doubt that he wants to fight them, and I don't doubt that they'd want to fight with him, these guys. But the reality of it is there are political boundary lines that affect which fights are feasible and which fights are not feasible.
I'd sooner expect Sandor Martin to fight either O'Hara Davies, Ismael Barroso, or Alberto Puello.
Any one of those 3 guys ranked ahead of him in the WBA's last set of ranked standings. I'd sooner expect Sandor to fight one of them for what could be the newly vacated WBA title before I'd expect to see him against either Teofimo Lopez, Jose Ramirez, or Jose Zepada.
Not because he doesn't want to fight them, but because that's the way it is.
Very interesting character, Sandor Martin. He's not as heavy-handed a puncher as a Teofimo Lopez, with the reputation for being heavy-handed, I should say, or a Jose Zepada. Not as statuesque and physically imposing as a Jose Ramirez, but he's very serviceable, capable, a crafty southpaw.
He's sharp.
Light on his feet, quick to counter. The guy's a good fighter is essentially what I'm getting at, but alas, I don't expect to see him fight those guys. I expect that Sandor's very next fight could be a fight where he either gets closer to fighting for the WBA title or actually ends up fighting for it. That's the way I see it. Beyond that, I think he might remain on the Matchroom DAZN side of things because they're capable of doing shows for this guy.
You know, he headlined that Jose Felix fight.
What you have to consider is that we're not on the eve of any of these fights that he proposed. He's very close to fighting for a full-fledged world title. He has a very high-profile win over the likes of a Mikey Gersha. I'd say that compared to everybody else, he's got the most high-profile victory in the whole of the 140-pound division. So if you put your thinking cap on and you fast-forward a little bit, do you get the sense that Sandor is going to want to bend over for these guys here stateside?
If he makes it far enough to where he sees himself become a champion.
This in unison with the politics. These are factors that you want to think about. You travel abroad, you beat Mikey Garcia in a big upset. A fight nobody expected you to win. You go back to your neck of the woods, you win in style. You keep winning in style to where you see yourself become a world champion, and you think he's going to bend over to kiss these guys' asses.
Like I said, it's not written in stone, but it's something to think about.
All those guys he mentioned, those are top-ranked fighters. Teofimo Lopez, Jose Ramirez, Jose Zepada. Those guys' names is going to get mixed and matched with each other, not Sandor's.
It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
In welterweight news, ahead of his upcoming unification match with Errol Spence Jr., WBA champion Yordenis Ugas said, "I think Spence is a better fit for my style. A little bit different with Crawford."
Yeah, tell me something I don't know.
Yordenis Ugas knows better than to think about an undisputed championship showdown with Terence Crawford without first getting past Errol Spence Jr. That said, the reigning WBA welterweight titleist believes to have drawn a more favorable matchup for his upcoming fight than the one that potentially awaits in the wings. "I do think that Spence is a better fit for my style," Ugas told BoxingScene.com and other reporters during a recent virtual media call to discuss his three-belt unification bout. "I will be a little bit different with Terence Crawford. That's for sure."
Well, you'd have to be. Terence Crawford is more nuanced than Errol Spence Jr.
Seems almost taboo to say that given how polarizing that conversation has become, that Errol Spence, Terence Crawford conversation, but it is true. Terence Crawford has more layers to his game than Errol Spence Jr. does. That doesn't mean Errol's a bad fighter.
Well, I can already see the Spence fans balling up their fists.
Want guys like me to look at him as being more than what he actually is. And what he actually is a decent southpaw with a good jab, boxer-puncher that has an affinity for applying pressure. Decent sized for the welterweight division, though not all that big in the super welterweight division, sometimes called the junior middleweight division.
He's a good fighter.
I have to stay focused on this fight, noted Ugas. Not particularly interested in discussing any fight other than the Spence fight. This is a tough enough challenge. I can't think about anything else other than to beat Errol Spence.
Yeah, Ugas is a good fighter too.
Although there aren't any questions hanging over Yordenis Ugas' head as far as what his physical condition is.
The way Errol Spence Jr. has those kinds of questions hanging over his head.
It's because there's reason enough to ask them. The guy's coming off an eye injury that led to eye surgery and a year of inactivity. That's nothing to sneeze at.
And this ain't opportune matchmaking for him.
You often hear it said, styles make fights. And Errol Spence Jr.'s base style, his characteristics, his
habits,
they do play into Yordenis Ugas' base style in some ways. I mean, you think about how Yordenis Ugas fought Omar Figueroa when he took he took that guy's unbeaten record. He beat that guy from the inside out, deep in the pocket. A physical fight like that doesn't favor a fighter like Errol Spence Jr., who hasn't been in a fight in a very long time, and just so happens to be coming off of an injury. A physical fight like that. You think about how Ugas fought.
If Ugas gets off to a fast start, that don't favor Spence.
Errol Spence Jr., when he's fighting his fight, he uses his jab as a key. He jabs his way in to get within striking distance of his opponent to let off hard body shots, maintaining that space, that bit of space, maintaining that pocket to add torque to the shots.
Yeah, he doesn't collapse the pocket or smother his work. He's very good at that.
But in this Ugas fight, it doesn't actually behoove him to be so gung-ho with the exchanges. Get into situations where he might have to trade shots with Yordenis Ugas, who has fought in the last 12 months where Errol hasn't.
If a right hand lands on that eye, he's going to be in trouble.
Could be. I mean, you think about how Yordenis Ugas fought Omar Figueroa, beat that guy from the inside out, and then you think about how he fought Sean Porter, how he fought Manny Pacquiao. He was more of a counter-puncher with those guys, as they tried to bring the fight to him, in all the ways that Errol might try to bring the fight to him.
Yeah, Errol's not economic. He's no outside jabber. He's no pure boxer.
Errol's always been a prolific puncher, throwing punches in bunches. That's part of why he became so popular so fast.
He's an action guy. He's always been an action guy.
But if you go being an action guy with a counterpuncher with similar physical dimensions to yourself, the way he doesn't need to be right up on you to touch you with shots, counter shots. You go being an action guy with that counterpuncher,
you're going to give him a lot to work with.
You're going to do the more you open up, the more he can counter.
Errol Spence Jr. is a good fighter, but what he ain't is a pure boxer.
He's not completely defensively minded, hit and not get hit. No, quite the opposite. He's offensively minded. He's an action guy.
He's always been an action guy.
When he's physically fit, he can be very formidable. The question is is he physically fit here today?
Because if he ain't, being that same action guy he's always been, it don't behoove him.
I've never known Errol Spence Jr. to be anything other than an artillery fighter, an offense guy, an action guy.
There's a big difference between fighting him and fighting Terrence Crawford.
You see, the things that have made Errol Spence Jr. such a formidable fighter are physicalities. It's physical stuff. His work rate, which directly relates to his cardio, his punching power, or what's supposed to be his punching power, his size, coupled with the fact that he's a decent boxer that fights out of the southpaw stance, which oftentimes can throw an
orthodox fighter off.
the southpaw jab coming over the top of the orthodox jab, lead foot advantage, all that
I don't
jazz.
think Spence is a bad fighter.
But the difference between what makes Errol Spence Jr. such a formidable fighter, Terrence Crawford, is a glaring difference. I mean, it's not just physicality with Crawford, though he is very strong.
Very quick.
He's got good cardio. He can fight on the fly the duration of the fight, the entire duration of a fight. Those are physicalities, but tack on that he's an ambidextrous switch hitter, that he can give you different looks out of both stances, both the orthodox stance and the southpaw stance, that he does seem to have two separate base styles, the pure boxer and the boxer puncher. That's where Terrence Crawford lives. He can pot shot you, be very accurate whilst doing so from the outside, and out of the clear blue sky start applying a little bit more pressure, educated pressure, the way boxer punchers often do.
Pivots,
Shifts and hooks on the turn.
he's not limited to having to come forward to have things his way.
Errol Spence Jr. is. That's how he got sucked into that war with Sean Porter.
Unless you're trying to tell me he wanted to get hit that much.
Yeah, it was a plan. I'm going to let Sean Porter hit me more than anybody else has hit me.
Sean couldn't land that many punches on Terrence Crawford.
There is a difference between what you get from Errol Spence Jr., what you get from Terrence Crawford, and why you're getting it. Terrence Crawford, like many elite-level guys, top-shelf guys, he seems to have two base styles, the way Floyd Mayweather had two base styles. He started out as a boxer-puncher, a spiteful one, but as he got older, he transitioned to being more of a pure boxer. Here today, we see Canelo Alvarez, a guy who started out as a boxer-puncher with an affinity for counter-punching. These days is more of a pressure guy, an educated pressure guy that baits guys into throwing by crowding them and then uses his speed to counter what they throw.
Top shelf guys usually got two base styles.
Usually they do. That's what makes them so formidable, so difficult to figure out. For Spence is a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but a lot of what has made him formidable in the past directly relates to his physicality. And physically, we don't know where this guy is right now. So believe me when I tell you, if he tries to be an action guy with Yordenis Ugas,
After a year-long layoff and an eye surgery.
if he stays in character, he's putting himself in harm's way. This is one of those moments to where he's got to show that he's more than just a boxer-puncher that applies pressure. It would behoove Errol to try and be more of a pure boxer with Ugas than to be the prolific puncher he's become known.
The more you throw, the more he can counter.
We'll see what he does, because this really isn't opportune matchmaking, and I'm not as confident that Errol beats Ugas as I was that he would beat Danny. With Danny, I felt that was just a tune-up fight, but this
This is different.
seems like a sink-or-swim kind of situation from where I'm sitting.
See if Errol's got enough left in the tank to beat Ugas.